In 2001, a historian named Roger Kirch was digging through centuries of old documents. Court depositions. Medical journals. Personal diaries. Stage plays. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. But the same two words kept appearing. Over and over. In documents from completely different centuries, written by people who had never read each other's work. First sleep. And second sleep. The references were casual. Matter of fact. The way you might mention breakfast or lunch. A character in a 1600s play tells another to go to your first sleep. A court record from the 1700s notes that a crime occurred after first sleep, before second sleep. A diary entry calmly describes waking between sleeps to pray, talk, or have sex, before going back to bed. Kirch found over 500 references. Spanning hundreds of years. Across multiple countries and languages. And then, sometime in the early 1900s, the references stopped completely. Not gradually. Not slowly. They simply ended. As if an entire human behavior had been switched off. You sleep through the night. One block. Lights out, lights on, 8 hours later. That feels normal to you because it is the only way you have ever slept. But for most of human history, it wasn't how anyone slept. And the way it changed is one of the strangest stories in the history of the human body. Here's what segmented sleep actually looked like. As darkness fell, people went to bed not long after sunset. There was nothing else to do once it got dark, and candles were expensive. This was first sleep. It lasted around 4 hours. Then, somewhere around midnight, people woke up. Not in a panic. Not checking a clock. They simply woke up, the way you wake up after a nap. And they stayed awake for 1 to 2 hours. In that window, in the dark, people did ordinary things. They tended the fire. They talked quietly with whoever else was awake. Some prayed. Some had sex. Some just lay there, thinking, in what historical records describe as a state of calm reflection. Then, when they felt tired again, they went back to sleep. This was second sleep. It lasted until dawn. This wasn't considered unusual. It wasn't written about as a problem, a disorder, or even something worth explaining. It was simply what nighttime was. The waking period in the middle had its own name in multiple languages, and people structured activities around it the way we structure activities around a lunch break. So what changed? In 1879, Thomas Edison patented a commercially viable incandescent light bulb. Within a few decades, artificial light moved from a luxury into ordinary homes across the industrialized world. And with it came something the human body had never encountered before in its entire evolutionary history. Light, on demand, after dark, every single night. Before artificial light, the boundary between day and night was absolute. When the sun went down, your options were fire, candlelight, or darkness. None of those were bright enough to meaningfully delay your body's transition toward sleep. Your internal clock, the one regulated by a tiny cluster of cells in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, received an unambiguous signal every single evening. The light is gone. Begin winding down. Electric light broke that signal completely. Suddenly, for the first time in human history, you could choose when night began. And people did. Bedtimes pushed later. The window for first sleep got compressed. The natural waking period in the middle, which used to fit comfortably into a long night, started to disappear simply because there wasn't enough night left to contain it. By the early 1900s, sleep had been consolidated into a single block, not because human biology had changed, but because the conditions that produced segmented sleep had vanished. The body adapted to the new environment the same way it adapts to anything. Quietly, and without anyone noticing it was happening. Within 2 generations, segmented sleep wasn't just rare. It was forgotten. Completely. The phrase, first sleep, disappeared from language so thoroughly that by the time sleep researchers in the 1990s started finding references to it in old texts, they had no living context for what it meant. It wasn't a word anymore. It was an artifact. In 1990, a psychiatrist named Thomas Edison ran an experiment that would accidentally rediscover it. Edison took a group of participants and placed them in conditions designed to mimic a pre-industrial winter night. 14 hours of darkness. No artificial light. No clocks. No external time cues of any kind. He wanted to see what would happen to sleep if you simply removed everything modern life had added. Within a few weeks, every single participant's sleep pattern changed in the same direction. They began falling asleep a few hours after darkness began. Then waking up for 1 to 2 hours in the middle of the night. Calm. Alert. Not anxious. And then falling back asleep until morning. Segmented sleep. Reappearing on its own, in modern humans, the moment the modern environment was removed. Edison's participants described the waking period in the middle as one of the most peaceful states they had ever experienced. Not insomnia. Not frustration. A quiet, meditative alertness. Several described it as the most restful period of their entire night. Here is where this gets personal. If you have ever woken up at 2 or 3 a.m., fully alert, for no obvious reason, and immediately assumed something was wrong, you have just experienced a fragment of what used to be completely normal human sleep architecture. Your body did exactly what bodies have done for most of human history. And the only thing that has changed is the meaning you attach to it. In the 20th century, that waking period got a new name. Insomnia. A medical condition. Something to be treated, medicated, and eliminated. But the data we're collected suggests something different. The waking period in the middle of the night may not be a malfunction at all. It may be the default setting that artificial light simply painted over. This doesn't mean modern sleep is wrong, or that you should try to force yourself back into a segmented pattern. Most of modern life, work schedules, commutes, social obligations, is built around consolidated sleep, and fighting that structure can create real problems. The point isn't that segmented sleep is better. The point is that what you have been told is the only normal way to sleep is, historically speaking, the unusual one. For nearly all of human history, the night had two halves and a quiet space in between. A space for thinking, for connection, for simply existing in the dark without needing to be anywhere or do anything. That space didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because, for the first time in 300,000 years, we found a way to make the night look like the day. And the part of you that used to wake up in that quiet middle hour, the part that used to sit with the fire and think, is still in there. It's just been waiting for the lights to go out completely. Which, for most of us, never happens anymore.